This is the Alphonse Mucha artist study. Been looking forward to this one for a while. This was redeemed by Rosie, and we're gonna look at a whole bunch of Mucha pieces. You can see them. Oh no. Little me points this way, but big me points this way. Yeah, there. You can see them all over there. We're gonna look at these ones off to the side. Have just a few notes. So usually with these artist studies, I try not to look at the pieces we're studying too much beforehand. I look at them just enough to figure out kind of an approach. So a few things I want to look at when we look at these pieces. I want to look at, of course, composition. Every artist study so far that we've done, composition has stood out as an important thing because it's among the most important things, maybe the most important thing. Crochet will tell you it's the most important thing. I won't disagree. Within the composition, I want to look at big elements and zones. I want to look at complexity versus simplicity. It kind of follows from the first one, but and flow and I guess focal point as well. Should be mostly obvious in all of these. And then I want to look at figure. And then if there's time and if I feel like it, a pattern, which I'm a little bit less interested in just because I like looking at the patterns, but dissecting them, replicating them, to me, it always gets a little tedious. Drawing the same thing kind of a bunch of times. So I want to start off looking at this one. I got my circle template. I think we'll make good use of this today. So I noticed immediately, and I'm probably going to say some obvious stuff, but I think when doing these artist studies, it's important to state the obvious as well. Start off by talking about the obvious and then move on to the hidden. The obvious stuff is a lot of his works, including this piece here, he breaks up into these sort of shapes. These main geometric shapes. I like that he uses rounded corners. And I'm going to make a note of that. So we have these basic geometric shapes sort of formed around the circle. I like that he has the white gutter. I like it because it makes me think of comic books. And I wonder if any of this is... I guess not. I wouldn't read this panel by panel. I wouldn't look here, 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 and here. I would definitely look in the middle of the circle first, which is his focal point. So we have the figure here. Also, as with all these artist studies, those of you in chat, please chime in, participate. Let me know if you notice anything, see anything that you want to bring up. I've just noticed something that I hadn't. He breaking border slightly here and down here with the drapery below. So just here with the little bit of the clothing and the drapery down here. And very slightly on the circle. It's almost a tangent, but it just barely breaks out. Yeah, the framing in his art is very good. Your eyes keep going to the bouquet of lilies in her hand. The bouquet down here, right? Her hand here. This one makes you think of stained glass window. Oh yeah, that is good. A lot of his work has a stained glass window feel. The colors are very good. You see the pinks, little hints of blue in there, and you see the peachy shades. Yeah, so that goes to focal point, which is a good thing to note here. So the focal point in this one, there's a lot of his pieces, I think, just from my cursory glance, and we'll see if this holds true. My theory, my thesis, no, my hypothesis. Aha. My hypothesis is that he uses a lot of sort of maybe major and minor focal point. But I think the main focal point would be the face. Focal point 1. And then I think in a lot of his pieces, the hands, or one of the hands, would be second focal point. That's definitely right. And that also, I think, the complexity versus simplicity plays into this. So let's finish putting this in real quick, just roughly. So we have within the circle. How should I describe this? I think within the circle we have complexity and simplicity in the face. So, and the hair is part of the complexity. We have this complex area framing the simple face. And then I think we have the same thing going on down here. We have kind of we have the shape of the flowers where the hand is holding them. And that's our complex. Then this area around it here is all pretty simple. So for the main focal point, we have a simple area surrounded by a complex area. And for the secondary focal point, we have a complex area surrounded by a simple area. I think we have maybe some patterning. I think I would say maybe we have the most complex area would be here, and then we have sort of a lesser complexity, like this pattern up here. Okay, let me think about this for a second. We have so we have the value scale, right, where 0 is white and 10 is black and 5 is a middle gray. I think maybe the patterning we can kind of break down into that as well. For example, the sort of patterning on the drapery here would be maybe a 2. So more simple, but still kind of a pattern. Maybe this would be maybe a 4, because even though it's kind of a little bit complex, it's the same shape, just sort of 5 times or less, more or less identical. And then we have this area here, some of this stuff going on. This would be more of maybe a 6. Then we get down into this area and we have much higher levels, overall complexity. And that is surrounding this very simple face area. Does that make sense? Am I getting too off the trail here? I think maybe pattern as value might be something we can think about. Take note of that. That'll be a question we can explore. Pattern value. I was gonna suggest the use of flat, lineless spaces to help guide the eye to drawing. Yeah, I think so. And then maybe, so there's an outline as the initial frame, and then we have a secondary frame, this flat field here, and then we kind of go between line spaces and flat spaces. So there's this flat space here, there's a flat space here. This whole arm basically flat all the way up. I think it's the kind of, that's a pattern too, right? There's the small sort of, the small patterns and the, what should you call it, the meta patterns? The hair has the curls and the hairpiece, which is probably an Art Nouveau jewelry style. Right, the hairpiece here. Yeah, the curls definitely, which are part of the flow. And so the curls, and then a lot of the marks on the body are more straight. We have this sort of straight lines. I mean, there's subtle convexity to the way he's drawn the figure, but you kind of blur your eyes or look at it further back. It's a lot of pretty straight lines in here. And so that's another contrast. So let's think about contrasts. We have curl or circle versus straight. We had, what's the Blighted said? Flat lineless space. Line versus flat color, right? Flat. We'll include the white as a color. I think that versus flat color areas. And of course, simple and complex. The hairpiece is some kind of high-tech communication device. That's right. That's how you interface with the mech. The aesthetic hides the utility. Yeah. I appreciate that there aren't a ton of harsh angles, at least that I can see. You see it in the frame, but on the figure. Yeah, and even in the frame, it's softened by those rounded corners, right? Even though we have like this pretty harsh angle, it's rounded, so it softens it. So yeah, there's a definite softness. There's a softness in the shapes, and there's a softness in the color, and even the line. The line is, so he uses I think it's a dead line it's called, or maybe a dumb line. I think it's a dead line. The line is basically one width in this piece. I think in some of his works he goes with a heavy outline and a thin inner line. On this one, the only place I can see where the line starts to get thicker is here and maybe on the top of the hair. And it's really not so obvious. Yeah, there's some slight variations in his line, but it's I think his line is soft as well. So for softness of shape, softness of color, softness of line. And the places where there's not softness, I think maybe just this element up here. So even within the figure, we're talking about the simple versus complex. Note that for these. Simple, complex. Even within the face, most of the face is very simple, but then the eye is more complex. The eye has some, looks like some variation of line and some shading and some variation in the color as well. I think that we have this complexity in the circle, have this simplicity face, and then we have the complexity of the eye. It's even like complex, simple, complex. Around this is even simple. Very interesting. I like these. I'm noticing more and more these shapes. This kind of peach color of the dress. Here. These flat shapes. So these are mostly, I would say these are mostly kind of triangular. Maybe, maybe not. These ones are maybe not. Scratch that. Oh, and finally, for this one, for all of them, the signatures here. In the Rockwell study, the signature turned out to be kind of an important compositional element in a lot of his works. So I'm curious to see if that tracks here or not. Anybody have anything else to say about this one before we move on to the next? This is a good starting point to think about what we can see, what Mucha's tropes are, what he's interested in. Pretty colors, yeah. Yeah, that's right. I guess I didn't put color down for something to look at. Yeah, his colors are all quite nice. Also, I think these are lithographs, if I'm not mistaken. And so I love the texture. The texture in here. It's a sort of a soft, probably from the stone, or maybe from the paper. But his colors here, he's got it's pretty pastel-y? Maybe that's the word. He's using, what is he using? Green, orange, kind of a pink, yellow. So he's using a lot of colors, blues. Using the whole crayon box, but they're all very soft, very muted. So where's the most saturated colors? You mentioned there's a splash of saturation down here, and there's one in the flowers here. And maybe the hairpiece. Maybe that's another compositional indicator. But it's not much more saturated than the rest of the stuff. And I think the most saturated color would be in flowers here, maybe. But also, I have to say that the colors, when I was looking for pictures to use, for the reproductions to use, a lot of them, the colors look different from image to image of the same piece. And so I'm not sure how well we can trust the colors in these reproductions. The Mucha Trust website has a lot of good images. And so I think the color in those is probably the most accurate. So when finding these images to use, I tried to get the ones that were the closest to the ones on the Mucha Trust site. You can't use those pictures from their site. So I had to find my reference elsewhere. I want to say Tiffany was also prolific at this same period, and you can kind of get that in the stained glass background behind the model's head. Tiffany, like, is it glass? Sorry, Rosie, can you, who, I'm familiar with Tiffany. I don't know much about, Nouveau. Louis Tiffany. Do a whole other study of this one. Let me see. I have seen these. I don't know much about them. Yeah, it makes sense that they would be coming from the same time period. And like Pinecone said, this definitely has a stained glass look to it. Oh yeah, also I should say, this is Mucha. This is a self-portrait. Just happened across this when I was looking for reference images. And it's interesting, you know, he has the focal point, which is pretty much the same, and it just kind of trails out. That not only Mucha did this. This was sort of common, but thinking about this in contrast to his sort of finished pieces, got some curly flows, be a bit more detail in the eye. To me, the color looks like a gradient, more saturated feeling on the top and less on the bottom. Oh, okay, let's see. Yes. That is a good observation, Ursa. It is definitely more saturated in this area. And even maybe the gradient sort of radiates. I think that top band here is less saturated. This is more so. This is much more so. Yeah, and then it goes down. So, let's see, where am I writing this? My notes are already a mess. Focal point, simple and complex, and also saturation gradient. So I have channel points redemption, and if you hoard enough channel points, you can redeem it for an artist study, and you can choose the artist. And so this was redeemed by Rosie, and we're doing Alphonse Mucha. This is the third in a series. Previously we did Dr. Seuss's After Dark paintings, and a few paintings by Norman Rockwell. And I quite enjoy these. Learn a lot. I've already learned a lot today so far. This kind of brings up the conversation of where's the line between craft and like art, to which I say there's no line, because this is both. This is fine art, this is sculpture, this is craft. Either he makes the colors softer at the bottom. Yeah, definitely there's something to that, Ursa, for sure. Let's see if that holds true in the next ones that we look at. The draping of the green at the bottom of the dress is paler. Yeah, down here. It is almost like it's translucent. That's another good point. It's more yellow here. And yeah, you can see it's translucent because you can see the arm behind it just very slightly. So this part where it covers that green background. And making it translucent down here would also sort of soften that contrast. So that's a good technique. All right, let's look at logical next step. Why don't we look at this one next? I really like his use of the white gutter. And I call it a gutter just because it's the comic book terminology. It's kind of an inelegant word for a very elegant element, but it's the word I know. If anybody has a better word, use that. But To me, these are comic book panels with gutters. How I see it. So I love his use of that white space. Yeah, this one is also quite top heavy. I think this one also has 2 focal points. So this one I think was an advertisement for, I don't know, for gin or something. Whatever's in this bottle. The shoulders are within that inner circle. It's this one long strand of hair bringing the eye down. That's very interesting. This comes all the way down to this dish. Bottle. Whoever designed the bottle, I feel like is simpatico. Right here. I can't find what kind of alcohol that is aside from liqueur. Garden variety liqueur. There's the hand. Here's the arm. Got the other hand also holding flowers. The first one. And got this drapery. I love this drapery. The drapery looks like it's holding the table up. It's covering whatever legs or whatever might be on the table. And I like that it sort of tucks into this top frame here. Spills out over the bottom one. Again, his signature is down here. Looks like there's some text, some legal text or something down here. More rounded corners, of course. What if he drew the bottle first and they designed the bottle? That I wouldn't be. Yeah, exactly, Rosie. I wouldn't be surprised. Or whoever designed the bottle was looking at his stuff. What if Mucha's entire style was because he saw this bottle, though? All right, we have text at the top with his nouveau kind of lettering style. Very flowing. All the long shapes, like the stems of his letters, are just slightly convex. At least it looks like that to me. That P just sort of very subtly kind of bows out. We're looking at as a pattern. I think there's a pattern in the text in the negative space. I think this can be read as one, that the text can be read as one kind of a pattern. And if we're looking at the complexity of the pattern, like here, this was a 4, this might be a 3. Here. And then the circle, within the circle is a bunch more circles. And then more flowers here. So we have complex, relatively complex, relatively simple. These flowers give us another relatively complex frame. And then we have the relative simplicity of the face. Then looks like his eyes are heavily rendered compared to everything else. The face is very minimal except for the eyes. So that's the same as in the first one. The circles within the circle bring your attention to the circular nature of circles. It really does. So focal point 1, again, is here. And we have Complex, simple, more complex, more simple, more complex in the middle. And this straight line here. So there's so much flow, right? Everything is round, everything is soft. And then we have like this spike that brings us straight down the edge of the plate. And that is definitely focal point number 2. It's even got a high collar above the circular neckline, so not a ton of attention is drawn to it. Yeah, the neck, the collar, I think the collar... So there's the circle of circles, that's the complex, there's the complexity. Then there's the simplicity inside, like the negative space. And then the second circle of complexity, I think, is that collar. And then the flowers all the way around and broken up. Your exit from this kind of island of simplicity where the face is would be that spike of hair. That's kind of, and there's even a break. Yeah, there's a break in that complex ring here in the top left of the head. If you're coming through and reading, you read the text and you come around, you're into the face, maybe is the top left of the head, and you move through the face, and then that spike of hair brings you out of those layers down to here, and it's broken by the figure as well. Here. Is that a demon? Oh man, is it? It looks like something clumsing. That is interesting. I have not seen that. Let's put that here. Just to the right, in this space here, there's a column. It's this flat kind of pink column. And then, yeah, there's like this... It's weird... It looks like a claw. Wonder, what is the significance? I don't know if it's grabbing... I don't think it's grabbing the column, but it is overlapping it. And maybe it's some kind of bird, because maybe this must be a bird wing here, right? Like this pattern coming around. You guys suppose that's a bird's wing? And there's the edge of the circle. I usually don't like things with a lack of color, but using the flowers as a little splash of color is great. Yeah, it breaks up that white space nicely. And it, I mean, the white space is good because it gives the eye a place to rest. Otherwise things get too busy. And then having that splash of color also guide the eye down. So if we're talking about these flowers here. Also, is she giving us the finger? This, and then we have the flowers here. Maybe that's a secondary compositional element, because we have the one flower down here, the vine. And so if this big spike of hair wasn't doing it for you, maybe the flowers here, the flowers here, the flower here, leading us down. We have this one red, the wax seal on the bottle there, kind of in conversation with this bit. They're of a similar shape and similar size, so maybe the eye is intended to kind of jump between those two. Yeah, it looks like maybe a talon or some kind of a bird. It's got to be part of a bird, right? I think that the pattern behind her head in that relatively more simple ring, it looks like it might be some kind of a bird Yeah, at the top, it looks like there's a profile of a bird. 2 profiles at the top, opposite each other. Like the old Russian state seal or something, 2 heads at the top. Yeah, there's the 2 bird heads or something. She might be giving the finger. Oh, Pinecone's had enough. Your delicate sensibilities have been offended. Okay, so the word Trappistine is the name of the liquor. So that doesn't give any clue, unless that means some kind of a bird thing, or whatever creature this is supposed to be. Tsarist Russia eagle seal. I don't know if it's Russian since it's a French liquor company, but the crosses are very Russian Orthodox feeling. All right, now where was I? Oh yeah. So another thing I wanted to mention that I don't think I mentioned in this first one is his faces, at least so far. This is a flat profile, and this is almost flat. She's got her head tilted back ever so slightly. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so the profile here is flat, but then the figure is not. So the shoulders, we can see that receding, right? The shoulder is in front, the shoulder is behind. And same with the hips here. So we have like a more 3/4 view for the body, and then the face is flat on. Now here we have the face, we're looking up ever so slightly. And then the shoulders, I didn't draw them very square. The shoulders are square. Mostly square. And very subtle. And then we have the hips that are turning in space. I feel like the hip to our left is closer to us than the hip to the right. I think with the figure, we have kind of like that. It's usually contrapposto, I think, for his stuff. Shoulders, they're tricky. They look pretty flat, although I think maybe because we have some overlap here, maybe this one is further back, and that hip is more obvious. That this angle, maybe like that. Totally missed the Ravens. Yeah, I totally missed those too. Until Plumsink mentioned this claw here, completely overlooked it. To me, it just became a sort of a flat area to rest in between the circle and the circle in the face. Very interesting to have this white shape sort of sliced down. I guess he's slicing the composition into thirds vertically, at least in this segment. And it's broken with the cloth. But we have this big white shape. Basically a big white shape like this. And almost white shape of the face. And all quite complex up here. Quite complex in the bottle. And everything else is really simple. I mean, even though the drapery is very complex, it's almost a flat color. And then we have the gradient. And so Ursa, I think your gradient theory is holding in this one too. I think we have more saturation here, and then a gradient down to less saturated. I think that's holding. Clearly there's a double eagle back there. I'm guessing there's supposedly a second column behind her head that we cannot see. Yeah, they're maybe behind the hair, right? Because the hair comes down. And then these circles have a kind of, like you said, orthodox maybe? Like a little curly something. Here. It's a cross, but it also looks like it could be... It also is not inconsistent with a lot of the flower patterns that he uses. And both pieces, the head pieces are top notch. I love the style. Yeah, I would say haven't focused too much on them. I'm not like I said, for me the pattern, zooming in on that detail, maybe I should. But you're right. I love how this head is just almost a block. We just have that little bit with the chin. Like his figures are so flowy and elegant, and then this face is just this chunk, and yet it doesn't feel. It has an elegance of its own. Yes, what I'm trying to say. There was a flower here. Another flower like that. I love these, I don't know if vines is the right word, but these strands that tie it together. Leaves. Oh, it looks like the neck, the collar has a pattern that is pretty similar to these circles here. Another repeating kind of motif. And, oh yeah, and so I guess that collar is almost like they took a segment of this circle, kind of modified it for the collar piece there. I think he's cutting up the piece more than thirds. The bottom of the floor is a hard line. The table makes a stop point. The circle bottom makes a stop point. Yeah, I think it is. I don't think he goes with thirds. At least he hasn't in these two, really. I think there's more of a sophisticated breakdown than that. That's right, Ursa. You love the fashion stuff? I also like it. I don't like to draw it. So I'll just do this. I'll make some scribbles. But there's some good flow. So, aha. Simplify. And the hair. It's kind of flowers in this shape. And then flowers like that. They're kind of in balance with each other. The head is tilted a little bit this way. I think this one maybe is a little bit heavier. Not much. So, and then I guess we have that jump from flowers, flowers to flowers to flowers. That even makes interesting. This kind of like that. Flow that way. Okay. I don't know if it is the age of the poster before it was photographed, but the colors look rather subdued. For instance, of flowers you'd think would stand out a lot, and they don't. Yeah, I was mentioning earlier, finding ones that are with color fidelity. if you look for the same Mucha piece online, you'll see a bunch of different versions that the colors look different, which is common for art photography and stuff. But it seems like, especially for summer, the summer piece, the colors are wildly different. I had a heck of a time finding a good one for summer. I ended up going with this one, but I don't think this is quite accurate. I'm not sure though. They all looked so different. And so I can't trust the colors in these reproductions, so I'm not talking too much about the colors, but I think the relative saturation level we can probably talk about. And so relative to everything else, the flowers here are more saturated, and then the seal on the liqueur more saturated. So the last thing I want to say is, again, we have in the main focal point has the most complexity surrounding a very simple area, and the secondary focal point has simplicity surrounding a complex area. So nowhere do we have a sort of a complex thing against a very simple thing, or so than here, and then we have a simple thing against a very complex thing here. And so our first focal point is a simple area surrounded by complexity, and our second focal point is a complex area surrounded by simplicity. That's what I got. Okay. Already been for an hour. We've only looked at 2 of these. We're not gonna. I have 9 pictures prepared. I didn't expect. I should have expected that there would be this much in each one of these. It's funny, looking at the Mucha pieces, just having kind of a glance. What I want to say is I say it every time. The reason to do this is because all this stuff I didn't see when I was picking these images. See it after I start drawing it. That's why. That's why we got to do it. That's why an artist study is a really good exercise. I mean, I'm already thinking about in my own work these methods. A lot of these methods, the focal point, the pattern as value is very interesting to me, which I didn't even really mark down, but each pattern has its own value, and in lieu of heavy rendering or even more major color shifts, he's getting most of his value change from the patterning, and that's very, very interesting. So let's see, this one also uses pretty much a dead line, and then we have the flow versus the straight, the circle straight here. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Rosie, if you have a preference for what we look at next, please let me know now. So this one is a bit different than the first we looked at, and that's good. What is the same is this format, which I really like. He does these like bookmark format. I guess it makes sense because he has a lot of standing figures, so it's logical that the picture plane would have proportions similar to a human figure. All right, this one here. This one has no use for the circle template, so let's get rid of that. It has no little repeated patterns and things. Not so tightly, but it has loose versions. So yeah, I love this format, Rosie. Yeah, exactly, Ursa. Exactly. There's a circular feel. Let's think about that. First, I'll put in the figure. So now the head here is 3/4 view and tilted back. So no more of this flat. It's like a progression from flat profile to sort of just slightly looking up, and now this is doing more of this. So any thoughts I had about him using flat face with a more gestural body, this is denying that thought. So we have the drapery coming down, and is that supposed to that looks like what is that anatomical part of a flower? Is that the stamen or something? Too much science today. Diatoms, what's this part of the flower called? You're a science. Piston stamen. Okay. This kind of looks like that. This bit coming down from the drapery. Kudos on the gown being almost the same color as her skin, but still enough draping to show that it's a gown. Yeah, it's pretty much identical, but so he uses line to indicate that it's clothing, nothing else. Oh, diatoms are. Of course. Maybe this was inspired by a diatom. These hands are almost, this hand at least on our left, almost like a Michelangelo hand. So this one is the first one that we've looked at where he uses a much bolder outline for the figure. I think he does that in quite a few of his pieces. We just haven't, not in the ones that we've looked at so far. Flowers. Another one here and here. So we have a little bit of overlap now. The figure. So the bottom of the figure overlapped. Here. Here. And the top of the figure is not overlapped by anything. Except for its own. Except for the clothing, of course, but none of the environmental elements. Named after Iris, the Greek deity of rainbows and the messenger to the Greek Parthenon. Excuse me. He's drawing the hands in a cheaty way. I wonder if I can find an article on that, because there is no way I can explain it. Cheaty way. His hand, this one looks a bit small. It looks smaller than this one. This one is foreshortened. There's a lot of character to this hand. Pinky is up. And you can see there's even the last two segments of the fingers look like there's some tension. I kind of like this hand. This one's a little wonky, but it's wonky in a kind of Renaissance way. There's a circle, you can see it behind the irises on the left-hand side. Yeah, there's the sky is making kind of almost a circle. I think it's more of an oval, but it's circlish. If that's what you're talking about, Rosie, this bit back here. This color. It's like flow of the sky through, and then it gets even more saturated. Oh, interesting. This blue back here is really saturated, and then there's the orange of the hair. And so we have that complementary colors. And so the focal point, face again, 0.1 at least. And so the focal point here, we have focal point from color, we have the complementary. And I guess in this one, maybe the The simple complex pattern is more of one that is in the Z space, in the third dimension, coming towards us, perhaps. So we have the background, the background is simple, and then the next more forward part is the flowers. That's complex. And then the next most forward one, the hair. Another mid maybe. The hair is, so let's see, we have a simple, we'll put that at a 1. And then we'll put this at like a 7. And the hair is probably a 4 or 3, let's say 3. And then we have the face, which is again a 1 or 2. And then the eyes are more complex again. And a lot of jumping forward here. And the deepest part of the composition, I guess, would be here as well. The next deepest part of the composition is probably here at the shins, this area, at this flow. Ah, interesting. So the flow of the background joins up with these stems, flowers here. True. So we have this. This is the picture plane. We have figure kind of like that. We have the background flowing like that. And it is a front to back. So the closest thing to us in the whole composition is here. And then it goes in backwards in space behind the figure. And the deepest part behind the head. Okay, let me see. So back to the hands. It's basically where you keep the 2 middle or 3 middle fingers together. All right, yeah. One heavy outline just around those 3 fingers. And then kind of group them. And that's interesting when, I mean, because our hands naturally kind of, naturally kind of group like that, or maybe that. But the ring finger and the middle finger often group. And the pinky is a lot of times out doing its own thing. But yeah, he did have that kind of grouping going. Yeah, it does look good. The language of flowers. Iris means faith, hope, courage, wisdom, and admiration. Right. Different colors of iris have different meaning. So these ones are all this kind of purple, right? What's the meaning for that? Cream changes saturation with the sky background. Yeah. And the irises, the top right-hand corner, are more saturated than ones at her feet. Yes. Yes. So Ursa, once again, I think your saturation idea is coming into play here. We have the most saturation here with the hair. The hair is quite saturated. And that sky and the irises more saturated here. As we go down. And I'm interested in this. Draw it one more time. It's kind of from behind to in front. This is one grouping maybe. This is another grouping. Have this backwards here. So maybe we can group this into 3. This shape in the top right corner. The swoop that starts off as the sky and ends up as this foreground plant. And then the third grouping would be the figure. Purple iris means wisdom, strength, and courage specifically. All right. He's got this pendant, like diatoms. This pendant here, and that's probably the only element that has that kind of patterning, that kind of, I guess, artificial flower patterning rather than the natural flower patterning. One green stick in the very front. Yeah, that one green stick, that's the closest thing. And I like that as a compositional element. Her hand on our right is resting on drapery, which is resting on something, whatever is not seen. Yeah, that is the same thing he did here, which I like a lot. He's covering the structure, right? He's just giving us the gesture. Excuse me. He's giving us the gesture, and he's hiding the structure, which I guess is sort of his entire thing, right? There's so much structure to his work, and yet the thing that we notice is the flow and the gesture. And so maybe this is a metaphor for his entire thing. Plum's Ink. The structure is all there. Everything is solid. His figures are solid. All these shapes are architectural, and yet the thing that is really salient is that flow. He has a two-part saturation. This one, the very background is light on top and dark on bottom, but the image of the flower and the person is dark on top and light on the bottom. The person is, let's see, the image of the flower and the person is dark on top, light on the bottom. I think his sky, it's this blue is the saturated part, but yeah, there is a splash here that's darker. I think overall, I guess this is darker than the figure. This corner here, so we do have that dark on light, light on dark, or saturated on desaturated, or simple on complex, more of these contrasts. Again, his figure is really made up of not quite, but almost straight lines. And all of the flowers and the sort of sky and the drapery, well, maybe not the drapery. Everything that's not part of the figure. Now I'm seeing these stems back here. Looks like some kind of plinth or seat that's covered by the hem of her gown. Yeah. Something she's leaning against, maybe. She's a very rigid tail, right. Going with tail, Pinecone? Let's see. Plinth is a good word. Alright, let's move on to the next one, unless anybody else has anything. Actually, there's one more thing I noticed. The only white in this whole composition is this form here, and in the background there's like this sort of shape of white, and I suppose that is kind of this to this. In the previous one we have this and it helps us jump back to that. Interesting. The pose reminds you of the Venus painting of her in a shell, but the other way. Like the mirror image or something. Yeah, definitely. I wonder if it's if that's, I guess that's a classic pose maybe. And it is contrapposto, right? We have, I've got her hair drawn, so it looks like she's got like a perm of some kind. Or some kind of wig. not nearly as elegant. Contrapposto is when a figure has the hips and the shoulders are kind of opposite. In classical sculpture, you see it a lot. Yeah, and the legs. That's right. Mentioned that as a product of it. And so then we rest on one leg. The David is the good, but I don't think I can show that because it's vulgar, which will get angry. We've got this, and then we've got. Again, what am I doing here? I'm looking at. I'm trying to reference this one and draw on my quick here, like that. We have the shoulders, we have the hips come up, and we have all the weight on one leg. The other leg is kind of bent. Contrapposto with 2 P's. I really want to look at this one. You good with that, Rosie? I'm going to assume in my reference here that the alligator clips are not part of the original design, so we'll leave those out. And actually, I'm going to leave out the paper too. I think. No, I'll leave the paper in, but it's subtle. In the reference image here, if you look closely, there's the white border, and then just inside it, there's a very slightly gray. I think that's the original paper. So that's what I'm going to use drawing here. So the border is very small between paper and the image, and I might end up erasing that paper border. There's a very distinct sharpness in this one that you don't get in the others. Yeah, definitely. This one is much bolder. Maybe that's to do with the subject matter. Right away, I'm noticing this line here leads us right to the face. It's right in line perfectly with this face. And what is up with this twisting? Look at this figure. These legs. There's 2 legs and a hand. There's 2 legs and an arm. Here. Here's the arm. 1 leg on top. Wow. This is pretty contorted. Other one. This element here. Have a triangle. Interesting, we have this triangle, this red and kind of red and white, or red and slightly, say red and white. This triangle here, and then there's a square and a triangle here. And nowhere else in the composition. Just this here and here thing. Yeah, that's right. The headdress is so the knife and the headdress kind of evoke one another, or the headdress. Maybe the headdress is foreshadowing. So if we're supposed to start at the top and move our way down, we read this, and then we see this face. These wild eyes. And maybe these shapes here are a foreshadowing of what's further down. I love how the mouth is covered. I think we mentioned it briefly a week or 2 ago. It's very interesting how this face is really, the emotion is really clear, and he's done that without the mouth, like pretty much only using the eyes. And I guess that's in line. I'm making this face so crappy. It's in line with his other work as well, where all the features of the face are really understated except for the eyes. At least the ones that we've seen so far today. And so I guess this is a logical sort of continuation of that, where instead of making the mouth super minimal, just get rid of it altogether. Oh, and then this flows right into the figure here. And we have this empty shape, more or less, with the knife framing the knife. And the knife brings us out of this open shape. And like I said before, this line brings us straight down through the neck of the figure, the slain figure face here. Sarah Bernhardt was apparently a favorite subject of his. Yeah, it seems so. It's almost sun-like, the headdress, so it makes sense since Medea is related to Helios. Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, and then the circles. You know what? I completely even missed. This one has circles in it. So these circles are kind of sun-like too. And it looks like there's actually a whole landscape going on back here that I didn't notice. Some kind of a cactus or something here. Tree, and then like a mountain. There's clouds. The mouth is covered gangster style. Or maybe it was COVID, you know. The eyes of the window to the soul. Yeah, that's right. And he's really good at eyes. It's a theater production. Yeah, that's right. I'm gonna dictate how the actress was going to react. I don't know. I feel like the reaction of this figure is it's kind of freaking me out. I'm gonna draw that. It is kind of a haunting. This one, like the pupil eye is kind of not even touching. That's how wide the eye is. These big wide open. And even just only a little bit of the eyebrow, and he's covered up everything else. He's covered up almost both eyebrows. And I think he's used that nose to really good effect. The nose kind of, almost like it's being pulled. These are the darkest colors we've seen him use so far too. Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. By far the darkest colors. Excuse me. The way she's holding the knife is awkward, like the end of the knife is against the heel of her hand. She's not holding it as if in a clenched fist. The deed is done, right? It almost looks like she has two fingers over the hilt or whatever. And the handle is up against the palm, like you said. Gonna take a stab at where this is in the story and assume she just murdered her children. So this one, the simplicity is the background, and then the complexity is all of this business. The hair and the crown. And then we have the simplicity again of most of the face, and then the complexity of the eyes. So again, we have this patterning of simple, complex, simple. Create our focal point. Now this one, the focal point. We have a focal point here. We have a focal point for the knife. And we have a focal point, I think, probably down here. And the hierarchy of these focal points must be 1, 2, 3, right? I mean, I was joking about like comics earlier with these paneling, but this one is kind of a narrative, right? The way you move down through, see what's just been done. The body language is more contemplative. I wonder if it's a little bit defensive as well, having the hands in front like that, like gripping the wrist. I like this kind of shoulder pad here with this decorative thing here. And so again, he's using, oh man, look at that. Just like in the earlier one. The arm. But then we have this much more understated, but perfectly vertical hooky thing. So like like in the second one we looked at for the liqueur. This is going on exactly, almost exactly here. That's interesting. And so we have this straight line, this kind of point, and it's up against these flowy drapery here, bringing us through. We have these moments where things are complex to the point of abstraction. I'm going to say here, the hair here, here and here, bringing us around. Figure here. Much contorted figure. And it looks like... Do you think this is two figures? This has to be two figures, right? Earlier I thought this was one figure that was super contorted, but now... And you say murdering her children, right? This has to be two figures on the ground. I'm now... There's no possible way that these legs belong to this torso. But that is kind of visually confusing. Maybe it's supposed to be. I think it's one person laying sideways hanging off a block. Okay, let's try to figure out this figure before we move on to the next piece. I think we got time for one more after this. If this is a figure, here's the head. We have the shoulders are this way. So they would have to be going back. Looks like there's an arm. At least the drapery kind of indicates that there might be an arm there. But then the hips would have to be this. And then the leg. I'm not this bendy. I guess people back then were a lot bendier than they are today. Yeah, this could be one figure. But wow. What do you all think? Is this one figure or is this two? Because it looks like it could also be one figure laying this way with another figure like here. There's the legs. So the head would be behind drapery and the other figure would be underneath it. Dead body more bendy? I thought they were more stiff. Let's see. I feel like it might be more than one body. Legs are not proportionate to the size of the torso. Yeah, this is interesting. So Mucha is usually really clear. He's very clean and clear. And this might be my favorite of the ones we've looked at so far, and yet there's this ambiguity at the bottom. Maybe that's intentional. I would imagine everything that Mucha does is intentional. She'd have two children, so it makes sense. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, any other things to notice, to note on this one before we move on? Also, guess the ambiguity would be to avoid spoilers for playgoers. Ah, maybe, yeah. Maybe we're supposed to think it's one figure, and then we're shocked to learn that it's two. Yeah, awesome font. Yeah, definitely. All of his lettering is great. We could do a whole stream just looking at his lettering. Reason for the confusion of the multiple bodies would be that he wanted to keep the same layout of the tall thin profile of the art, but it's hard to put multiple bodies into a small space like that. Yeah, that might be the case as well, and it would maybe make it too much. Like maybe if there was two figures down here that was like two faces, maybe that would disrupt the hierarchy of the focal point. I think we can say focal point 1, 2, and 3. I feel pretty confident about that. This is definitely the main one, and it's definitely the one that is sort of the most incepted with that simple, complex kind of pattern. Here we just have one layer of simple with the sort of bit more complex, the hands on the plain background. Then down here we have somewhat complex, but not even so much. Maybe have maybe like a 2 surrounded by a 5, maybe. Here we have the hands. That complex, you know, maybe a 5 surrounded by 1. And here we have like a 1 and then like 8. And then maybe a 2 and a 7 or something like that. The backdrop has sunset colors, which would also tie in the story and the tragedy of Medea's life. Ah, interesting. So yeah, so I'm not so familiar with this play, but yeah, it would make sense that they would include a lot of sort of references to the story. Arms and legs are different colors of the skin seems to suggest 2 bodies. Yeah, the arm, it looks a lot more blue, and the legs look a lot more yellower. That is a good point. She leaves the play in Helios' chariot, Deus Ex Machina style. Let's see. All right, Rosie, we have time for one more. Let's see. This one here, I really like. I like them all, but now it does look like 2 buddies. That's the arm going up beside the second head. Yeah, I think I've been flip-flopping. I think it's 2 bodies. I'm going to I'm the final arbiter here. I don't care if there's any Mucha scholars out there who want to contest it. There's 2 bodies there. All right, last one. We have... Now this one, oh, hold on. This one and the previous one. Okay, there's some rounded corners here and some square. It's mostly rounded. And in this one, it is all squared off. So that's a departure, at least from what we've looked at so far. I like how, just looking at it right off the bat, so this is another, is it Sarah Bernhardt? But Sarah has been completely covered by the plant. And we see Bernhardt very clear. And I guess she was probably well known enough to where you didn't need the first name. Yeah, another play poster. Yeah, so he did a lot of advertisements and a lot of posters for plays. And then it seems like his own personal body of work, he did like to do series, at least from what I've seen. My fairly quick research. He did the 4 seasons, and he did the flowers, the personification of the flowers, and he did the celestial bodies one. What was it? I think somebody had mentioned it earlier. The sun, the moon, and the stars, or whatever that one was. I like this one because I like this shape. The figure here. It's also kind of a departure. The figure is this one like chunk. Drapery. Another instance of the drapery breaking a little bit of these frames. We've got this little guy here peeking out. This is I guess he's holding up. Looks like he's holding up pillar and the sign. This is a double portrait. It's kind of would this be like Greek tiling in the top here? And he's got another. He uses a lot of these triangles with the one Ursa's gone, right? This long is that the hypotenuse? Ursa told me I can't use any more science or math words. The long side of the triangle. A lot of the times he's using these rounded. Is the two straight with the one round as a framing element for the circular elements. You covered these in theater history. You covered the plays, or did you cover the art as well, like the posterns? Yeah, the patterns on the gown, like this one is really getting maximal here. All embroidered brocade. The gesture of this hand is very interesting here. All right, so then this is another face that is not quite back profile. You can see that back eye just a little bit, and again the head is tilted slightly back. So it seems like except for this one, in all of these, maybe not this one. So these three got his head just ever so slightly tipped back in space, which makes it more interesting for one, but I think it also maybe speaks or represents a kind of a confidence of the figure. I think if the head is a little bit back, it's more of a confident pose. So it makes sense that these three figures would be confident that way, right? You'd want it in the ad to sell you liqueur. This is the embodiment of a flower, and Rosie, I think you said that the iris represents something like that. And then this figure, absolutely resplendent, would also want to have that kind of a feel, I suppose. All right, interesting. So we have the figure is very vertical. Again, yeah, this is another one, just like this. Just like this. Another kind of very strong, tapering, vertical that brings our eye down to what I would say is the secondary focal point. We can see the figure. It's kind of back a little bit, top half more stable on the bottom. But even though mostly vertical form, subtle movement, and he's really good at implying the Z space. I like how the hem drapes over the Theater Renaissance sign. Yeah, it's interesting how he's drawing us down there, covering this guy's kind of lurking. I don't know if that's the mascot to the theater or who it is. I guess viewers at the time would probably be familiar with this guy. And in this case, the name of the theater is not covered at all. I mean, the T is a little bit, but really it's not, and the R, but not enough that you can't tell what letter it is. And yet we have Sarah Bernhardt. Sarah is completely obscured. Maybe she was more well known than the theater, or maybe she was just more confident in her name recognition. The head and hair look very posterized, flat. Yeah, the head, the hair is probably the most flat of all the hairs we've looked at. Even these ones had some flowy sort of detail inside. This one, the detailing inside the hair here is very minimal. I'm gonna go ahead and say this is focal point 1, and I think this is probably focal point 2. Makes sense. Hey, Crochet. Glorious thunderstorm, huh? Are you referring to my live stream? Not the first time I've been compared to a tempest. The dress design is very interesting. It's a little more boxy than his usual style, and there's a cape that extends down. Yeah. So I was gonna say that before I got distracted by this pointy bit here. Yeah, his clothing is very, like you say, boxy, much stiffer than his other works. But then we do have, like in this one, we have this going from in front to behind. So we have you know, over the figure, draping around behind the figure, and leading us in this kind of a swooping way down here. But I like this hand. His hands are very curious. They're not, like, I would say his faces are, even though they're stylized, they're very realistic. His hands, they're not like unrealistic, but they're way more stylized. They're much smaller. I bit crappily here, but hands are always quite small, and I don't know, handled maybe a bit differently than his faces. I really like how this ribbon for the sign here, the la is written on this part where it folds over. I don't know if this is the logo of the theater or if this is something he created for this piece. But like that. Signature is here. And this is not a circle per se, but arch. Semicircular, circulish object. And so then we have, oh, and behind the face, there's another one of those kind of the Coptic crosses or something. But it's still quite simple. It's very, very toned down. So we have our archway, which is simple. Then we have the flower crown, which is more complex. Then we have the face again, simple. And then we have the eyes, the eye, complex. So again, his framing trope. I did mention the awesome little gremlin dude, but I can go into more detail. The awesome little gremlin dude. He's monochrome. He has both hands showing, which is bold. His hands are much more realistic and less stylized than the main figure. And like I said before, I'm not sure if he's supposed to be holding up this, like kind of Atlas style. There's a foot there. Like, is he holding up? It might be on his shoulders, or he might just be popping in front of it. Maybe he's crawling up from in between. Leaning on a sign. Yeah, maybe that. Keeping the theater safe from bad luck. And then once again, like Ursa had pointed out, it's more saturated here, and there's like a gradient as we go down. Here. So even the patterning here is more complex. And then as we go down, it kind of simplifies. Yeah. So all of that would definitely mean that the focal point, I mean, it's obviously this is the focal point, but that would be all the little subtle things that come together to do that. He's a little stylistic different. He might be a representation of some real sign gremlin. Yeah, I was wondering if he was the mascot of the theater. Or like if that's maybe this whole thing is the logo. Trying not to get squashed. Yeah, maybe he's some representation of the theater. Now crochet. I have one more chimera coming up for you, which is the mermaid flowering vines multicolored DNA helixes. And I got the brilliant idea in my head to do the final piece of your triptych in the style of Mucha. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm gonna make it this format. I'm gonna incorporate. I think the DNA and the flowering vines are good fits, and then the mermaid as well. So I think since we've taken all this time, looked at all this Mucha, I think it would make sense to do that. Anybody have anything to add that's not math related? Thank you, Rosie. Thank you for the redemption. I'm glad you got something out of it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. This was a lot of fun, as they always are. Very happy we got to look at Mucha. Again, an artist I wouldn't have looked at so closely if not for the redemption. So thank you, Rosie. Thank you, everybody, for participating. You all made it much more valuable. So I appreciate that there was so much back and forth.